The Craft Brewers Conference in Indianapolis is upon us, and you may even be listening to this episode while traveling, given the timing of its release. But before we start, I just want to mention one last time, we're throwing a CBC party with some beer industry friends. It's called the Beer Me 500, 6 to 10 p.m., Tuesday, April 29th at the Hangar, just a few blocks from the convention center. Expect food and beer, racing and golf simulators, and more. It's invite only, so if you're a professional brewer, reach out to your rep at any one of the party's co-sponsors. Those include Prairie Malt, Hopsteiner, Deutsch, and Omega. If you're a craft beer and brewing advertiser, just drop a line to Bryce on our team and we'll get you hooked up. I'll be there, of course, and I look forward to sharing beers with all of you all. We're in New Zealand for this episode of the Craft Beer Brewing Podcast. Once again, a wonderful Sunday afternoon here in Wellington. It's windy, of course, because it's never not windy in Wellington. That's just kind of par for the course. But the weather is awesome because the weather is awesome all of the time. I looked it up for American listeners. The average hottest summer temperature in the hottest months of summer is 69.5 degrees Fahrenheit. And the coldest part of winter averages a low of 44 degrees Fahrenheit, which is absolutely incredible. Anyway, joining me for this podcast is Braden Rawlinson from Fork and Brewer. Welcome to the podcast, Braden.
Kia ora, how's it going?
So funny story about this one. I got lots of funny stories, obviously, about how all these podcasts come together. But when we're starting to plan this trip in December, January, Stan Hieronymus, I talked to Stan Hieronymus about it, and Braden had reached out to Stan asking if he was coming down to Hop Harvest this year, and of course he wasn't. But Stan sent your information over to me. He's like, you should reach out to this guy. He does great pie reviews on every Friday as a pie fanatic. Also, you took over, the head brewer job here at Fork and Brewer, the storied brew pub here in Wellington, from Kelly Ryan, another well-known brewer on the international scene that, had won a lot of awards here. And you have continued that streak for Fork and Brewer. Last year's New Zealand Beer Awards brought home the Champion Microbrewery Award, won 2 golds in the international lager category for Otto and Golden Mile, a liked beer, and Helles. Some impressive awards, and you won some other medals in addition to that. And so you have continued the winning tradition here at Fork and Brewer. You also have a side project and a love for Belgian style beers. And with your 9 Barnyard Owls brand, which is funny enough, an anagram of your name, you've been focusing on those kinds of beers, spontaneous beers, a New Zealand take on grape ale, not Italian grape ale, New Zealand grape ale, blending New Zealand wine and New Zealand grapes with New Zealand hops to make a uniquely New Zealand expression of a beer wine hybrid. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about lager. You've got a high throughput process here at the brew pub and have developed some techniques for lager brewing that crank through. Well, you speed parts up, you slow other parts down. You're changing some of the typical rhythm of lager brewing to kind of fit the brew pub, and obviously the medals are proving out that is a successful strategy. So we're going to talk all about that, and I'm going to keep drinking this Czech Bohemian Hipster Czech style pale lager made with Riwaka while we talk about this. Before we do that, for years, G&D Chillers has chilled the beers you love, partnering with 3,000 plus breweries across the country. They're proud of the cool partnerships they've built, offering 24/7 service and support. They build with non-proprietary parts, expert craftsmanship, and constant innovation. Their in-house engineering crew have been piping breweries, wineries, and distilleries for more than 30 years. They offer free piping design and consultation with the sale of every chiller they build. Reach out for a quote today at gdchillers.com or call to discuss your next project. And brewers, what if your yeast could do more than just ferment? With Berkeley Yeast, it can. They bioengineer ordinary strains and make them extraordinary enhancing the flavors you want and eliminating the ones you don't. Now, in addition to competitive pricing, they're offering free overnight shipping on 5+ barrel pitches. Try it out. If you don't love it, they'll happily refund you. So why settle for ordinary when you can brew with better yeast? Visit berkeleyyeast.com to learn more and start brewing with science on your side. Also, as breweries expand beyond beer into other segments like mocktails and CBD beverages, Old Orchard is here to help. They can formulate custom blends featuring specialty ingredients. Whether trending flavor additions or nostalgic favorites, the next best thing is around the corner at Old Orchard. More information and free samples are waiting at oldorchard.com/brewer. That's oldorchard.com/brewer. All right, Braden, give us the lowdown. How'd you get into brewing, and then how has that career path through the brewing world led you here to Fork and Brewer, as well as your own project at 9 Barnyard Owls?
Well, like most brewers, I started off with homebrewing. I basically started my pathway and my love for all things fermentation. I dabble in winemaking, mead making, seltzer, anything I can ferment or get my hands on to ferment, I'll give it a crack. So that would have been, not sure what the equivalent is for your high school, but second to last year, about 16, 17 years old.
Sure.
Started experimenting with fermenting and took it a step further, and post high school got into doing more advanced brewing and getting into all grain, and just had a real love.
What's the drinking age here? You can do that, huh?
No, you can't. You can't. It's 18.
Sure.
Is the drinking age. So don't condone underage drinking, but I was doing. By the time I'd reached the legal drinking age, I was achieving good results as far as brewing and producing a palatable product that didn't give you the horrendous hangovers that I got from other people's homebrew. So that basically started, just the love for all things fermentation, looking how you could take the most basic of raw ingredients and, through magical alchemical process, end up with, something that's completely far removed from your original ingredients. That makes people happy when they drink it because of the ethanol. It was just a passion, a spark that started and erupted into something eventually that had become full time. Left New Zealand, went to work for Black Horse Brasserie in Sydney. Did a brief stint there for 3 months. So this is my first role outside of turf management, which is my previous profession. Worked there for 3 months and then ended up working at a small production brewery on the Northern Beaches called Nomad. And they had non-ties with Birra del Borgo in Italy. So ended up doing a year with Nomad and then going overseas to work at Birra del Borgo, who had recently been acquired by ABI. So that was different, working under the ABI machine. That is where I learned about IGAs, but that's another story. Did a bit of work there, came back, a few more months at Nomad, ended up going to Adelaide, working for a brew pub called Sweet Amber, and then came back to New Zealand, did another vintage winemaking, and then ended up starting at Tortara as a contract brewer. I had like a fixed term contract, and it was at the time that they were looking for a new head brewer. So I applied for the role, was successful in attaining the role, went through a rebrand, kind of burnt out, and then ended up...
And Tuatara as part of the Heineken DB.
Yeah, Heineken DB family.
Had a great Tuatara Hazy IPA in the airport in Auckland on my way down here.
Yeah. So that was... it's probably true to what it originally was, but yeah, one of my original recipes when we went through this rebrand, which was exciting. And then a few months later, I had shifted breweries, and that was my first taste into brew pubs. So went across to this place called Choice Bros, post Tortara, and was approached by Kelly Ryan, who had been offered a role at another brewery, production brewery, Boneface, up in Upper Hutt at Brewtown.
Yeah, we went there yesterday and had some beers at Boneface, and then saw Brewtown, an interesting development, an old tire factory.
Yeah,
that they've
SBT,
that they've redeveloped into a number of breweries. All of this kind of like, industrial center up there. Kind of cool.
Yeah. So Kelly was moving on, and he had been he had the mantle of being the brewer at Fork and Brewer for 6 and a bit years. He was back-to-back and still at the time reigning small champion brewery. You noted before I recently won the micro champion brewery. It's just volume size.
Sure.
So post-COVID, our volume output decreased below the 50,000 litres per year threshold, which then put us into a different category. I like to joke around, it's the whole quality, not quantity, mantra.
Sure.
But it's
not the size that matters.
It's not the size that matters, it's how you use it, exactly. So Kelly was moving on, and he basically approached me and he said, my job's coming available, and would it be something that you're interested in? Knowing for a while that I had worked at Tortara, gone through the rebrand, done a lot of the recipe development. I was actively involved with the NPD, or the new product development team, and we got 40 taps here, so you're constantly on your toes and trying to assess trends and historical beers.
A little different scale here, because now you're brewing Tuatara. It's production focused, and
so 2.5 million liters a year to less than 50,000.
Right now you're brewing on a 12 hectoliter system, roughly 10 barrels, and and just for most of the beer is sold right here in the in the brew pub.
Yeah, and it was it's kind of. At somewhere like Tortara, you have no control on, once it leaves the brewery, the quality that it's kept in. You have to have faith in things like cold chain distribution, and rely on aspects like that, so that the quality of the beer is as good as it is when it left the brewery. And I am directly responsible for the quality of beer when it goes into the fermenter to where it comes out and when it's dispensed. So I have full control. I can see, I can visualize, I can taste, I can smell my beers constantly and know that they're of the utmost quality, because not much of it goes outside of this venue. So... yeah, and that kind of like sense of control has, been a relief.
That's fantastic, and I can witness some of the quality right here in this glass of Bohemian Hipster, as I can just see each sip that lacing. I took, sitting there carved out in the lacing on the side of the glass, and so. But beautiful attention to to detail here, and so then with here you've got 40 taps. You're brewing nonstop. Lagers are a core part of what you do, but also every other beer style is as well. So you got to be creative across all of those kinds of things. And then tell me a little bit about Nine Barnyard Owls. This is kind of a small side project you developed, out of a love of Belgian style beers.
Yeah, so Nine Barnyard Owls kind of stemmed from my brief time in Italy. I was stationed at the original Vero del Borgo site, and that was under the control of one of the original BDB brewers called Matteo Corazza, and he was trained by Leonardo da Vincenzo. So Matteo is a very, very passionate man, yeah, we spent a lot of time together alone. I didn't speak that much Italian. He didn't speak that much English, but we communicated through the language of beer. So at the original BDB site, they do a lot of cool shipping, and so they cool ship all year round.
All year round.
All year round. It got to the point where they actually, once ABI took over, they separated the brand, and then that was released as Colli Rosso. Colli Rosso has since been sold, I believe, back to the original brewer Matteo, and he now operates outside of ABI. But yeah, he's just a fantastic brewer. He's got a very innate ability to know his ingredients, and it was there that I learned cool shipping, and I just felt like a resonance between the process, and it's like another step removed. You're so much in tune with your surroundings, and it's the whole concept of terroir, like encapsulating that into a bottle, because you've got that extra step, and it's you're harnessing the microflora from a region, which as a conventional brewer we get access to yeast, and you brew a Czech Pilsner with yeast from the Czech Republic, or you can brew an ale with ale yeast from the UK or America or wherever. But a lot of what he was brewing was so unique to the area, and that can't be replicated anywhere in the world, and I just thought that was awesome. And it's also like a very time it's not a time sensitive.
There's a seasonality to it.
There is a seasonality to it, but he was doing a lot in times that you wouldn't typically cool ship, because of the diurnal range of, they're based up in the mountains, and they'd have, the high daytime temperatures during the day, and then like you have the cold winter temperature, overnight temperatures. The diurnal range was so huge, so they could keep doing that all year round. So I was cool shipping in summer, which was weird. Because all the reading I had done on it was, in winter, strictly.
No, I get it. I mean, I live in Colorado and live at about 1,800 meters.
Yeah.
And then the mountains go up from there.
Yeah.
And, when we camp in the middle of the summertime in July, summertime is July for us in the Northern Hemisphere, obviously. It can be freezing, up in the mountains.
Yeah.
I'd be right because of that incredible temperature swing that happens. It's dry, it's high, and there you go. So then, you decided to come back here and also launch 9 Barnyard Owls. And then say launch, you have continued to develop some beers on your own as a side project, kind of exploring some of these ideas.
So it was like, at the time I was still working in Australia when I established 9 Barnyard Owls. And it was, I was actively working and living in Australia, and I was kind of thinking, what could I do? I want to start something for myself. I don't want to work for people, all my brewing career. I want to set a name for myself. And that was kind of one thing I identified as being something that was viable that I could do. I could go back for a couple of weeks and, find someone else's brewery to use and produce the wort. And I had a cool ship fabricated based on specifications from Italy, and I got a local engineer to build me what they called a giant bathtub, which was really hilarious because they didn't know what the hell it was going to be used for. And I just started procuring barrels from local wineries around where I established it, which is at my parents' site in Gladstone in the Wairarapa. About an hour and a half northeast of Wellington, and it's out in the country. It's beautiful. They had an old shed there that wasn't being really utilized, and so I jumped in and kind of spent a bit of money and put in a climate controlled room, and procured my barrels and got the work done, put in the cool ship, and then I just walked away from it. And then 6 months later, when I came back to New Zealand, due to unforeseen circumstances, I was tasting these barrels, and I was like, shit, maybe there's some,
maybe there's something
maybe
to
there's
this.
something here, yeah.
All right. Well, we can talk a little bit more about New Zealand grape ale later on, but I do want to start talking about some lager brewing in the short run. Before we do that, taste the modern flavors of indie hops at CBC this year in Indianapolis. Join Indie and Indie for 14 incredible collab beers to showcase Strata, Luminosa, Lorien, Audacia, Meridian, and more. Experience their newest hop, Audacia, in both a hazy IPA by Fidens and a West Coast IPA by Grains of Wrath. Dive the depths of Strata in T90, CGX, and Hyperboost forms with IPAs by Craft, Coast, and Flatland Brewing. Refresh your palate with the crisp, summery flavors of Lorien and an Italian Pils by Maui Brewing and a French Pils by Upright Brewing, and bask in the liquid sunshine magic of Luminosa with IPAs from Fort George and Barrelick Brewing. Check out the full CBC beer lineup at www.indiehops.com and plan to stop by their booth number 3122. They'll be as happy to see you as you'll be that you made the effort. Indie Hops, life is short. Let's make it flavorful. And are you a craft brewery looking to elevate your branding? Steel Chill Cups are the perfect promotional tool. Crafted from 100% recyclable steel and proudly made in the USA, these 16-ounce cups come in vibrant red, blue, green, and gray, designed to keep beverages cold and frosty to the touch. They enhance the drinking experience at festivals, tastings, and tap rooms. Customizable branding options allow breweries to showcase logos and unique designs, boosting brand recognition. These stylish cups not only serve a practical purpose, but also become keepsakes for beer lovers. Discover how Steel Chill Cups can put your brand on every pour. Visit steelchillcups.com today. All right, Braden, well, let's talk a little bit about lager brewing. We were drinking some Otto earlier, named after your dog. We don't need the story about that, but I want to talk about, although I do love your stories. I do love your stories. That and Golden Mile both won gold medals at in the international lager category at the 2024 New Zealand Beer Awards. It's hard to win a gold medal brewing the volume of beer that you do. You're certainly the smallest gold medal winner in that category. But you have an interesting approach to making lagers at this kind of small, 12 hec kind of scale. Talk to us about that kind of process, how you go about brewing compelling lagers at this small brew pub scale.
Yeah. So, I basically have in the last year switched to a new yeast supplier, which is a dry yeast producer. And so I am, because I'm at the scale where, their 500 gram bricks are an appropriate size for, a single brew length for me. And I've just found that using fresh pitch, dry yeast every time, just one and done. Don't need to worry about the inconsistencies that may come with repitching or cropping yeast. And it's, I'm at the stage where, because I'm micro, I'm not brewing as frequently as I may like. So there might be a time in between, lager brands or whatever, where the yeast is, sits for too long.
Right.
So
you're brewing your lager every 6 weeks on a cycle in order to, knowing that that's how long it takes to go. And so, and then maintaining the viability between that brinks, there's not a lot of space here to store a lot of that stuff. And
So it's the kind of, I have the consistency of knowing the cell count that I'm pitching every time, knowing the viability of the yeast that I'm pitching every time. I can, to the hour, basically predict the gravity movements. And
you don't aerate this either now, too.
No, so no aeration, because you've got all the sterols and all the necessary nutrient requirements for new yeast growth in the volume that I'm pitching the fresh yeast into. I don't rehydrate, but what I do that may be slightly different to brew pubs is I am a big fan of slightly higher fermentation temperature for lager, so around 15 to 16 degrees Celsius, but under pressure fermentation. So I use a digital spunding valve, which is yeah, I can basically dial that into between 12 and 14 psi, and I mean it's all purely anecdotal. What I'm doing, slightly higher fermentation temperature, but counteracting that through the use of pressure fermentation to inhibit any formation of unwanted esters or phenolics that may be undesirable in those styles. And yeah, so the end result is I can turn my lager ferments around a lot quicker, and more consistent, and that gives me the luxury to then in secondary lager them for a lot longer. So primary ferment, 5 to 7 days, typically down from 10 to 14.
Right.
Which gives, you buy
a week back.
Buy a week back, yeah. And then it's, just lagering for a little bit longer than I would otherwise have done in the
yeast
past.
Variant that you're using is basically a 3470 version.
AEB from a Lager W. So slightly outside the specifications of what they recommend. So slightly elevated temperature, slightly under pitching their requirements or their recommendations. But yeah, I've had no issues with it, and it's just so much more consistent than the guesswork that comes with cropping or potentially not cropping. Your required cell count of viable yeast for your next ferment. And it's just, simple things like sulfur blow off still happen, and hit the kind of goals that you're looking for on this. So the yeast itself is a low sulfur producer.
Sure.
I don't get any sulfitic compounds produced. So I don't know if that's whether or not to do with the slightly elevated temperature. But yeah, like previously in the past, I may have had that sulfitic compounds develop through yeast stress. It could have been underpitched, or didn't have the oxygen requirements or the nutrient requirements, or for whatever reason. But kind of moving to fresh pitch every time from dry has kind of helped to alleviate that and helped me to produce a more consistent product. And these brands of lager, we've got 40 taps, but they account for a massive percentage of our sales.
Shocked that a light beer or a light lager, might be a big part of your sales here.
Yeah, a lot of them are actually we find as well, we get a lot of non-craft beer drinkers come in, and they're drinking these beers, and they act as like gateway beers to other more flavorsome, more elevated flavored beers. It's neutral, clean, crisp, dry. You can't ask for anything else.
Sure. Maybe let's back up a little bit and talk about the fundamental recipe for light beer in that sense.
Yeah, so light beer, it's 100% Pilsner. No, there's
Pilsner or imported or?
Yep, no. So local Pilsner, we use
Gladfields.
Nope. So we use Malt Europe.
Okay.
So they're a producer. They're part of a bigger global supplier, but they have a maltster based up in Fielding, about an hour and a half, 2 hours north of here. And they produce a very consistent Pilsner malt. It's actually also known as Heineken B. So a massive percentage of what they produce is for Heineken.
Sure.
So it's that, when you're dealing with those macro quantities, they're, doing 50-ton, malt runs. And it's that you need that degree of consistency. And I'm, buying a few bags here and there of this product. So that is... I think that has kind of also contributed to the consistency run that I've had here lately, and that's I use that for 100% of my base malt. So it's Pilsner malt for everything, ales, lagers, everything.
Wow,
because I know the product. And then it's tweaking, specialties around that base. So it's just 100% pills and that, and then 100% SARS. Just sticking with that low alpha acid, clean, noble hop character, from that landrace variety.
Sure.
And it's characteristically beer.
Do you do any water, work here? You're in a coastal spot. Like we're not too far from the ocean where we are here.
So the water in Wellington is, it's soft, but you can't really trust the plumbing and infrastructure around this city. A lot of the I go through a few carbon filters a year, and just the oxide staining from rust, ferrous material, and get a lot of clay spoiling in that. So there's a lot of solid material in our water. But yeah, so as far as water additions go, I try to keep it as lean as possible, as soft as possible. I think in a 12 hectoliter batch, I use 50 grams of calcium chloride. And yeah, that's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no bullshit.
And then you've got a pretty simple 2-vessel system here, which means that you are not getting. There's no decoction, obviously, and things are staying pretty straightforward on the hot side.
It does the trick. It's a pretty dated system nowadays, but just some of the other breweries around here with their mash tuns have something as simple as raking it. So I'm the rakes. I got a mash pedal, and that's about it. It in that sense, it's really nice to work on a system like this because it's very tangible. You're doing things by feel. You're mashing in by hand. You're milling into bags, and then putting each one of those bags into the mash tun, and then mashing it in by hand with a rake, sweating and getting that steam in you and dust everywhere, and it's great. But yeah, it's a fairly archaic system. But one advantage that I do have with the system is that it's incredibly efficient. The method of heating is by means of high temperature hot water. So I have a high pressure hot water system loop. It's all jacketed, and I basically run 120 degrees Celsius water in a hot water loop under 1.5 bar of pressure, and just the 3 jackets, 2 up the side, 1 on the base of the kettle. You can just get some horrendously just vigorous boils.
You can rip it.
Yeah, but that doesn't have an effect on one thing that you think it would affect, which is head retention. It's a vigorous boil, but it's not as intensive in pockets like direct fire. Having that direct fire heating, on the base of the tank or something like that, and it's an amazing system. I'm quite lucky to brew on something at this size, because usually this size would be direct fire or electric.
Sure.
Which I'm not really a fan of.
So. Right. You mentioned that you are a big fan of kind of first wort hopping.
Oh yeah, hell yeah. There's a lot of conflicting readings on first wort hopping and whether it actually does anything. But yeah, for the last since Hoppy 2 years ago. So for
the Hoppy Symposium.
Yeah, Hoppy Symposium. I kind of learnt about it, so I knew about mash hopping. And what it may or may not do, saw a bit of data, and so I'll give it a crack. And from my perspective, it helps me to stabilize mash pH. And this is in a 200 kilogram grain bill. You're looking at just 0.5 kilo of T90 pellets. So I'm not sure what that is off the top of my head, grams per liter. But, stabilizing mash pH. I've noticed it have a really odd effect on, and it's maybe potentially contributing to my head retention, because when I Vorlauf, do the recirculation, I'm not getting the foaming. from the wort falling back into the mash tun as it's recirculating. So whether or not that's just retaining those proteins in the mash itself instead of foaming up and sticking to the side of the tank. And it also helps to potentially soften water, precipitate heavy metal ions, which there will be some in our water. I mentioned the ferrous material or the ferrous heavy metals. Yes, but it's all completely anecdotal. I've never done any testing. I'm just rolling with a gut instinct, and fuck it, it's not broke, so I'm not going to try and fix it.
Sure.
I'm just going to keep going as is.
Well, we already talked about fermentation and your pressure fermentation approach on that, so we've skipped ahead in that regard. Anything else that you do to finish off your lagers in general?
The only thing other than I mentioned before is probably just the slightly elevated, outside the specification of what the manufacturer recommends. But to counter that, or to counteract that, is just under that pressure fermentation to potentially, once again anecdotal, to potentially inhibit the formation of esters. It doesn't seem to have an impact at that 12 to 14 psi range.
So that's a little more pressure than the typical pressure fermentation.
Yeah, it's a little bit more. Hydrostatic pressure and all those fun buzzwords. It would be a little bit higher than what you'd conventionally have. Just due to the size of these fermenters and venting from the top of them, and it being a lager, yeast, bottom fermenting or whatever. Yeah, but once again, it's I haven't really, since I've started, doing these methods, and that I haven't gone back to, seeing if it actually is different, because I'm scared that if I do, I'll kind of relapse and take a step backwards.
If it's working, don't mess with it.
Well, exactly, yeah.
Well, let's change some gears. I would love to talk a little bit about, brewing New Zealand Pilsner, like this Czech-inspired bohemian hipster made with Riwaka hops, which you still call a New Zealand Pilsner because, again, it is made with New Zealand hops. Beautiful, and has echoes of Old World Lager, but also definitely just a noticeable, not entirely modern, but definitely New Zealand tinged. Not as much as I thought, not as much as I expected. Let's talk about that for a little bit, and how you integrate New Zealand hops into lager beer, where where that intersection happens. Let's talk about that. But first, breweries don't just need a point of sale system; they need a one-stop shop operating system. That's where Arrived comes in. Not only does Arrived offer a world-class POS built specifically for breweries, but they also provide Arrived brewery management, e-commerce, and more to help breweries scale and thrive. From taproom to distribution, Arrived gives breweries the tools to streamline operations and boost profits, all in one powerful platform. Want to see the latest innovations in action? Visit Arrived at CBC 2025, booth 1865, where they'll be pouring beers and showing off the future of brewery tech, or visit Arrived, ARRYVED.com to learn more. Also, attention all brewers, beverage makers, and industry pros. If you're at this year's CBC 2025 in Indianapolis, there's one place you must check out: ProBrew at booth 2801. Booth 2801 is where innovation meets refreshment. Come experience stunning animations of ProBrew's cutting-edge beverage processing and packaging equipment in action, including the powerful ProFill rotary can filler and seamer, and ProCarb carbonation and nitrogenation system. After experiencing their top-tier tech, why not grab a beer at their pouring station and bar? See ProBrew's solutions in action, chat with their experts, and enjoy a perfectly poured beverage on them. So don't miss it. ProBrew, booth 2801. ProBrew, brew your beer. Also, if you're launching a brewery or acquiring an existing one, consider our brewery workshop and New Brewery Accelerator. September 14th through 17th in Fort Collins, Colorado. Over 4 days, we engage in panel discussions, technical brewery tours, networking, and small working group sessions to help you better understand and prepare for the challenges of brewery operations. We help you learn what you don't know that you don't know. Tickets are on sale now. Visit breweryworkshop.com for more information and to secure your spot. So let's talk about brewing New Zealand Pilsner with Riwaka here. Riwaka, kind of a classic hop to use in New Zealand lagers in general.
Yeah.
One of the most expensive possible ways to make a New Zealand, but Riwaka, right? That's a Saaz derivative or a child of some sort of Saaz
D, I believe it is. Is Saaz B? Belgian Saaz, yeah, that's the one. So Saaz D. Obviously, as the name kind of leads to, its parentage is Saaz or Sazo. But yeah, we're kind of spoiled for hops, spoiled for choice for hops here in New Zealand. So it's basically your typical Czech style Pilsner, clean ferment, instead of exhibiting the old world characteristics, noble type hop characteristics. Your hop expression is the New World or New Zealand, aromatics, flavors, or expression. It's just they work so well in that style, and it's just such a clean, easy drinking style. When we do have summers, weather dependent, the other beer you want to drink, clean, crisp, refreshing.
So how do you go about making a Czech style Pilsner type base without decoction, obviously, here, and using your pressure fermentation 3470 yeast, and I think it's interesting. You're gonna solve the problem through some different means, right?
Yeah, it's basically just the same method that I'd do for any of my conventional lagers, my Munich style Helles, my German style light beer, with a twist. Those beers I typically wouldn't dry hop, they're undergoing pressure fermentation. They're a lot cleaner. You're not getting those, the potential for, the vegetal off flavors, characters that you may get from, dry hop contact time. And it's also, because these are typically standing in tank a lot longer, you don't want that potential for the extended contact time with hops. You get mercaptans and the other sulfitic compounds develop that you obviously don't want in a very lean style beer, and they just scream when you do get them in there. But the difference with the New Zealand Pilsner style is obviously using New Zealand hops. Riwaka is what I use 100% of in the Bohemian Hipster here at Falcon Brewer, and it's just basically just starts off as a lager, but then the only difference being that in the kettle it gets a fairly large Whirlpool edition, a lot of late hop in.
Still all Riwaka?
Yeah, still all Riwaka.
Is there first word in this one that's also Riwaka?
First word is Riwaka.
Oh, that's an expensive first word right there. Jeez.
Oh, okay, go back a step further. So you got a bit of first mash hopping, Riwaka.
Mash hopping.
First word edition of Riwaka. And then you'll also have the Whirlpool Riwaka. So no flavoring, aroma additions. Don't kind of really believe in that. It's just kind of bittering or in for me. Just try to keep it simple. But then in saying that, I also like to dip hop. Big fan of dip hopping, removing a small portion of the Whirlpool edition, and I dip hop with water from 82 to 85 degrees, and it's usually around about 10% of the hop weight. So if, there's 5 kilos of Riwaka going into the clean sterilized fermenter, there'll be 50 liters of 82 to 85 degree water, and that basically steeps or capped under pressure for the entire duration of the the 90-minute boil of the beer itself. But then this is obviously I calculate the water amount that I'm going to use based on my pre-boil numbers, and anticipate, what I'm going to need to liquor back to achieve my pre-ferment gravities and that. So there's kind of like a bit of tweaking around for that, but it's just taking a small proportion of your Whirlpool addition and doing it as a stand time in the kettle, in the fermenter itself with the hot water to, I guess, pasteurize it. But you're hitting those numbers where it's the lower end of isomerization, if at any.
Sure.
But it's and it's just pasteurizing. Ensure that what you're doing is you're not going to be contributing any other biologicals or anything nasty that could take it another direction. And then it also gets a dry hop with re-rock as well. So more money thrown there. So it's
that sounds ridiculous.
I mean,
what does a dip hop add? I mean, I imagine you've tried it without that. What is that? That kind of, because there's obviously a temperature difference.
Yeah. So,
but I would think that it wouldn't be. You're not talking about temperatures that are that far off, just from your Whirlpool.
Yeah.
And a similar kind of time.
So,
I get it in a sense. Obviously that same kind of technique is used in IPA making, especially if you're using kind of flowable hop oil.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense in that kind of way to kind of get more of that flowable, hop extract into that kind of liquid there.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, you're using pellets and you're doing it in a fermenter and now and it's lager,
Yeah. I mean, it's like, because I'm quite limited in, so you've got a great equipment set here, but I'm quite limited in the amount of hops I can actually use in the Whirlpool.
Oh, that's fair.
So
sure.
By removing a small portion of that and placing it into the fermenter with water, it also helps me to kind of push volumes as well. So I can get an extra 50-litre keg out of some of these beers that I'm doing with the dip hopping. As far as what it actually contributes to the end product, I mean, the method itself was developed for use in, Japanese lagers, which are some of the cleanest, easy drinking, smooth, integrated bitterness beers on the face of the earth. And I mean, there's a reason for that. And it's kind of a modern technique as well. This is a modernized interpretation of an otherwise historic style. So it's just kind of throwing as much technique as I can. It's kind of like the maximum intervention of of beer. But it's just pure lager yeast, pure Pilsner malt, and one hop. It's basically a smash beer. But
did you do a longer boil on this one just to kind of get a little more color and reduction in it, or
no? So you mentioned before, kind of forego the decoction because I don't have the ability to do that. Although, like if I do, my Hefeweizen, I'll draw off 70 liters or whatever I can fit into my pilot kit to boil that and then add that back to the end of the mash. So it's kind of like a botched decoction. So I boil for a 90-minute as a general rule for all my clear beers here. So all my beer is unfiltered. And I also have this kind of like theory that the extended boil time helps to kind of start that process of, precipitation and flocculation and aid in clarifying these beers because they just get a bit of fining and they're crystal clear and without having any adverse effects on other things that may be affected by proteins like the head
better
retention.
Break from
So it's
so 90-minute boil on this, but it's still 100% Pilsner malt.
Yep, 90-minute boil. I'm not boiling for an extended period to achieve color. You see, my lagers are fairly light, and it's just from the one malt, which is just 100% Pilsner malt.
What's the target final gravity of the beer?
Final gravity of the beers is typically between 8 gravity and 10 gravity. So I mean, what's that? 2 to 2.5 Plato.
So pretty lean. I've heard, some other New Zealand pilsners that we've had, and I guess the style allows
Probably
them to
a little bit higher.
a little bit higher, more like 3 Plato and whatnot.
So I feel as well like if it's a Pilsner, you want it to be crisp, and kind of targeting that kind of lower end of the range, it allows you to achieve that. And because I'm not relying on sulfates to give the impression of drier beer or anything like that, I kind of want my beers to finish in that lower range. And it kind of means you can drink more of it too without it being too cloying. And
Sure.
yeah.
How do you select or Riwaka, or how do you get to the kind of because there's a range to Riwaka, there's a pretty big range to Riwaka, in terms of where it's grown and, and everything else. And, this definitely has more leans a little more towards that, herbal kind of almost, not exactly Czech-like, but it's definitely more in that kind
more
of
towards noble.
Yeah, that noble-ish vein, more so than say some of what, we might consider this modern Riwaka, and so pick timing, I imagine, figures into that too. How do you, are there certain brokers that are making sure that they've got Riwaka that's going to hit some of those notes? I mean, this is not the Riwaka that if I'm making a hazy IPA, I don't want to be anywhere near this, Because
we're a microbrewery, we don't actually have the luxury of lot selection. We basically just get what we can, whatever's available, and if it's available. So we don't actually, I haven't been down to, a lot selection or anything like that since I was at Tortara, because, we're obviously producing a little bit more than what I'm producing here now. And, as far as hop forward contracts and that go, we can't actually commit to the volumes that kind of open up those avenues for you. But I mean, a lot of what we're getting, it'll be, multiple lots of hops that are grown across multiple farms and multiple suppliers that are usually then homogenized into kind of a more consistent across the year product, rather than, this comes from this lot and this comes from that lot. But I'd like to have that luxury to do that, but just unfortunately due to our production volumes, we
sure. Well, whatever you're doing, it's working for you. Don't stop with that. Let's talk a little. Let's change gears now and talk about New Zealand style grape ale, inspired by Italian grape ale, but localized and applied in theory here in New Zealand, because you're not very far. There's plenty of great wine growing regions, various points here on the North Island, and obviously Marlborough and Nelson and the South Island and others. Plenty of opportunity, plenty of great grapes being grown here, and fantastic wines being made. And then, of course, you've also got these really interesting hops grown down there on the South Island, and now in a number of different terroirs. So you, inspired by this Italian kind of approach, you decided to work on a New Zealand corollary to it.
Yeah. So when I was working briefly in Italy, I discovered the joy that is Italian grape ales. It's actually quite funny though, because I believe the style actually originated over there as a means of tax, because the beers that are made with a certain percentage of grape must constitute a wine, and wine is not taxed in Italy. So that came about as a means of
smart.
Smart. So they played the system. They're marketed as beers, but technically they're wines, and they taste more like beers than wines, but they've got the nuances of wine. And it's also coming from a country, one of the biggest producers of wine in the world.
Sure.
Or the biggest producer of wine in the world. But it's so steeped heavily in, winemaking tradition. And you've got some of these breweries that, it's a 15th or 16th generation winemaker that's moving to brewing. And they're bringing with them these obscure techniques and just different things that they're doing to beer that brewers would otherwise overlook, and it's just fascinating. And they also have a lot more exciting and interesting, regional grapes to work with. The grape that I work with here in New Zealand is the one that we're probably best known for, which is the Sauvignon Blanc. And it's the working on the philosophy of, what grows together goes together. Sauvignon Blanc gave the name to Nelson Sauvin, a very popular and, dare say, polarizing New Zealand hop that is characteristically quite similar to the grape and its aroma and its flavor. So I basically, just took the hop and took the grape and chucked them in a beer together and kind of working with that. As
that sounds really simplified. How did you actually go about doing that? Pilsner malt, obviously.
Pilsner malt, yeah. So 100% Pilsner malt. The emphasis is not on the grain in this product. The emphasis is on both the harmonious marriage of the hop and the grape itself.
So but no wheat component in this one, nope. Like some Belgian beers in this style. Okay.
Nope, no wheat at all. This is the conventional New Zealand grape ale as opposed to the spawn stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's just kind of like a clean, just dialed in interpretation of or expression of both the hop and the grape that New Zealand's renowned for, and it's in a brut style base, so it's fairly dry finish. Your Italian grape ales are typically kind of a little bit more residual sugar, but the grape actually contributes a lot of fermentables. It's not
highly fermentable.
It's all simple sugars, and then using.
And you're just using a standard your normal yeast on this, or?
So I have played around in the past with using wine yeasts. Here in New Zealand, we can't use GMO yeast. So
not yet,
yeah. But there are thiol liberating wine yeasts.
Sure.
So using them, tried co-fermenting, using brewer's yeast, wine yeast, co-fermenting. Using different yeasts, but it becomes a legal classification issue because if you're co-fermenting grapes, that becomes wine, and if you're fermenting wort, that becomes beer, and then blending the two together is a legal issue for New Zealand customs. So it's two different excisable products, but putting the grape must into the beer or into the wort and then fermenting it like that. That's okay.
Yeah.
So it's
as long as it's below 49 or 50. As long as it's only up to 49% or something like that.
So it's
that's generally our U.S. rule. As long as it's 51% beer, 49% fruit, you can call it beer.
On the safer side, I'm kind of more 60-40, like 60% fermentables coming from wort or grain base, and then 40% coming from grapes.
Yeah.
But it's just like plain fermented conventional fermentation, just to try to keep it as true to
an ester producing ale yeast or something.
So usually like a neutral fermenting ale yeast or a neutral fermenting lager yeast. Just to try to keep it as true to the hop and the grape as possible, without obscuring it with ester production and phenolics and all that.
Anything else to the kind of process here that you find interesting? There's no selection again on your Nelson Sauvin.
No selection on the Nelson Sauvin. I'm just kind of relying on.
Although you do, kind of, earmarks both like picking times for some of these, don't you, with your Nelson?
Yeah. So the Nelson Sauvin actually, the window for harvest actually coincides with the Sauvignon Blanc harvest window, which is quite cool. But
yes, I know. We were posted up at an Airbnb on the Heafy Winery right next to the Freestyle Farm, and so we were.
The harvest is going on.
The harvest was going on. We got to watch the wine harvest and process from the back patio of the house while they were doing it.
Yeah, it's a cool time of year, and I've the New Zealand grape ales, but for me I call them like a harvest ale because it's kind of celebration of both the hop and the grape harvest, and then you're kind of pairing the two in what is interpreted as a beer. But yeah, it's a very vinous kind of beer. Yeah, it's an amazing cheese beer as well because it's bone dry. Usually, I've played around with false carbonation and having that on keg, but the best results that I've had have been through secondary fermentation and bottle. It's just the quality of the beating and the carbonation is slightly higher, and it's kind of on the level of like kind of heading towards like champagne or sparkling wine, and yeah, it's just light, fruity, delicious.
You mentioned the brute base. What's the general finishing gravity on this?
Sub-zero.
Sub-zero.
So, yeah, 0.998.
So it's dry.
Yeah, dry. Yeah.
Damn. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, aiming for the drier. Yeah, and once again, let's just try to keep it as lean as possible.
That's way drier than a fair number of the Sauvignon Blancs that I've tasted here over the last week.
Yeah.
Some sweeter than others. I prefer a little more structure in mine than some of the.
Well, it's actually quite interesting though because it's so overloaded with flavor and aroma that your perception of the product has actually changed. So people drink this thing and they're like, wow, like that's so sweet or that, but it's not. It's sub-zero, but it's the perception because you're trying all these, you're smelling all these primary aroma characteristics and flavors that your perception has been changed of the product itself. And when you're drinking it, it's in your head that it's sweet.
Your mind fills in the blanks.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mind fuck, but yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Super cool. Is there anything to the way that you select grapes for those?
No, so I have experimented in the past with using fruit, destemmed fruit, whole bunch fruit, and then going on to using things like Mark, which is the pressed skins. Had okay results, but for this particular style of what I'm trying to achieve, using cold settled grape must. So it's just the pure, they use bentonite, they precipitate the solids out, and you get this crystal clear, amazingly flavorsome juice essentially from the winemaker. And I basically just rock up with some clean kegs and we just gravity feed into kegs. And it's also at the point where, because they're cold settling and it's stabilized, so it's at about 50 ppm of metabase sulfite. So that inhibits like anything biological from growing in it. And I've kept grape must in those conditions in kegs for 18 months. And it's still as fresh as the day that I collected it.
Huh.
So it's an incredibly stable product. And then, it's in a 50-litre keg. So I can just hook it up to the tank and, whack it into a fermenter, the reverse order that I do to fill the keg. So, yeah, just push it out with CO2 and then it's going into an actively fermenting beer. And then it just, simple sugars. Yeast is happy. It's kind of like chaptalization, I guess, but, using grape juice instead of sugar.
Cool. And your fermentations keep powering along.
Yeah.
They're doing harder work on your beer fermentables, and you put all this liquid crack right in there, and they just can, Yeah,
and it's also like these, when you're adding grape must to an actively fermenting beer as well, you're also changing the titratable acidity. So you're, adding malic, tartaric, citric acids to this beer, which makes it, it gives the impression of like more complexity, and it might appear to be crisper or have the impression of being crisper than like a brute IPA or something like that, because it essentially there's all these different acids working in its favor.
How much does the pH drop or the TA drop when you add that in?
So pH usually it would be around the high 3s.
Yeah.
Because I'm kind of targeting a lower pH for the base beer as well. but that would finish typically around 3.4 to 3.6. So I mean, yeah, on paper it's a sour beer, but you don't really get the impression of a sour beer because you don't have all the other stuff that goes with it. But it's just a complex, dry, expressive, interpretation of both the hop and the grape.
Sure.
Which is characteristically New Zealand. So
super cool, super cool. Well, let's zoom out as we finish up here and think about the big picture. You've got side projects, obviously, that you make. You're back from a large production brewery and now brewing on a 10-barrel system on a pub scale and brewing a whole bunch, and using a different tool set to, crank through a whole bunch of beers. And, but then you also are having to fill big shoes from Kelly before here, who won a lot of medals here at Fork and Brewer also, which you have done and you did last year with the Champion Microbrewery Award and all of those medals, and so you're carrying on this legacy here. What are you most excited about over the next year or two? And, what's, what kind of keeps you going and motivated? What is driving, the passion for you right now?
Just constantly in awe of how ever-changing this industry is. Like, it's constantly evolving. It's just an exciting time to be a brewer. Like, to do this as a profession, as a livelihood, it's just exciting. I'm like a real-life alchemist. I can take, these ingredients that everyone has access to, and create completely different end results. And it's just fun. Like, I am really looking forward to the Beer Awards this year and actually taking the opportunity to defend my title, because that's a motivator in itself, because it'd be fantastic to make the attempt and go back to back. But yeah, there's so much happening in this industry, and it's just an exciting place to be at the moment.
Well, that is a great place to bring it to a close. And I'm glad you're excited, because there's a certain number of folks that are disheartened right now, given the whole consumer market out there. And that's understandable too for a number of brewers.
Yeah.
But looking at the opportunity and the developments and the creative, stuff, and, how much more access to information, to ingredients, and how much better we're getting at that all of the time, and what that allows everyone to do with better beer is a really exciting thing. Anyway, let's bring it to a close with G&D Chillers. 24/7 service and support. Your brewery will never stop. Berkeley Yeast bioengineers ordinary strains to make them extraordinary. Old Orchard is here to help with the custom blends featuring specialty ingredients. Taste the modern flavors of indie hops and 14 different beers poured at their CBC booth 3122. Discover how Steel Chill Cups can put your brand on every pour at steelchillcups.com. Arrived as your one-stop brewery operating system. Visit ProBrew at CBC booth 2801 and see where innovation meets refreshment. And the Brewery Workshop will help you prepare for the challenges of brewery operation. If you've enjoyed this episode, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on the subscribe button, become a subscriber to Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Help support us and bringing you great conversations like this through the podcast. And also treat yourself, because there's a wealth of information. And Joe Stang has been working on a feature on, I think he's going to call it a New Zealand Hops User Guide for the next issue, the IPA issue of Craft Beer and Brewing, along with some great recipes from our New Zealand brewer friends. It's going to be chock full. It's going to be rad, and you don't want to miss it. So become a subscriber to Craft Beer and Brewing. Also want to throw out a little thanks to our friends at Freestyle Hops and Dave Dunbar, who secured some grant money to make it possible for us to come down here through Hoppy Research and get boots on the ground in New Zealand, experience the harvest, go talk to people for the podcast, work on this story, and all of those things. Hoppy Symposium was a wonderful event, as you mentioned, Braden. Highly educational, really deep, thorough information that was valuable to me. I took some extensive notes, and we're going to continue to follow up on some of the avenues that speakers at the symposium have thrown us down.
Make sure you get a hold of the slides. Yeah.
Fantastic stuff there. Anyway, I highly recommend it to anybody, and I'm not just saying that. Braden, if people want to learn more about Fork and Brewer, about the beers you make, about Nine Barnyard Owls, your side project, etc., where do they find you?
Yeah, so we're a brew pub in Wellington. That's the place you can find our beer. But yeah, just
It's just a short 14-ish hour flight from the west coast of the United States. So it's nothing.
it's worth the trip.
Totally
Worth the trip.
Totally worth the trip.
And yeah, Nine Barnyard Owls just watch this space because I've been going since 2017, but it's getting there.
Maybe we'll release something sometime
Maybe
soon.
I'll release something soon. Yeah, but yeah,
It's still, if you know, isn't it?
if I know, I know. Yeah, these things take time, and I'm in no rush.
There you go. Well, it's been fun talking with you about brewing. Cheers.
Sweet as. Thanks, mate.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.